Number 15. Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. Located across the US-Mexican border from El Paso, Texas, Juarez has become one of the epicenters of drug-related violence in the Mexican drug war. Since the early 1990s, the city has seen around 370 homicides of women, with a further 400 missing. The violence didn't escalate until 2007, when tensions between the Juarez and Sinaloa cartels boiled over into a full-out turf war. In an effort to fight the ongoing violence, the Juarez fired over 800 police officers over evidence of corruption and began a recruitment process aimed at doubling their numbers at the time. The growing violence resulted in the creation of a vigilante group, Juarez Citizens Command, causing government officials to fear further violence with an addition of armed vigilantes in the mix. In 2008, the Mexican Army's 3rd Infantry Company took over the fight from local authorities, and the city saw an increased military and federal police presence to almost double the amount before 2009. Due to the joint efforts of the military, Juarez and federal police, and the local and federal governments, crime has begun to drop as of January 2015, going from 130 murders per 100,000 people to 38. However, the drug war continues to be fought, and foreign visitors are advised to exercise extreme caution and warned not to venture outside of city limits out of fears of kidnapping. Number 14. Kabul, Afghanistan. The Afghan capital city, Kabul, has been the epicenter of the Afghan civil war since the communist coup in 1978. The entire nation has suffered through decades of turmoil and political instability. After the 2001 invasion of Afghanistan in response to the September 11th attacks, Kabul became the headquarters for the International Security Assistance Force. This led the city to become a major point of suicide attacks, bombings and shootings of ISAF forces and Afghan citizens. To this day, Kabul remains unstable since the replacement of the ISAF with the Resolute Support, aimed at advising the Afghan National Security Forces and local police in providing law and order without coalition assistance. The Taliban is still a danger in the country, and many from the ANSF have defected to their ranks, bringing large quantities of weapons and ammunition with them. IEDs and car bombs are still common, and as recent as August 2015, an army convoy traveling through the city was bombed, killing 10 and injuring over 60 people. Kabul's residents are under siege by extremists, and with RS advisors scheduled to leave soon, Kabul and the rest of Afghanistan have an uncertain future. The American and Canadian governments have issued strict travel advisories on Kabul due to the violence, and it is strongly advised not to visit the city for the foreseeable future. Number 13. Detroit, USA. Named the most dangerous city in America in 2013 and 2014, Detroit was once the home of Motown and America's booming automotive industry. Now, having faced the massive GM layoffs and major recession, Detroit is a city slowly shrinking in population. With only a population of 700,000, the violent crime rate is a frightening 2,072 per 100,000 inhabitants, and a murder rate of 45 per 100,000. Former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick incited severe controversy when he assaulted a police officer who was attempting to issue a subpoena to Kilpatrick's sister. While there were no assault charges brought against him, he later pleaded guilty to perjury, misconduct in office, and obstruction of justice. Things didn't get better for Detroit when it became the largest city in American history to declare bankruptcy. Many of the crimes go unsolved due to a culture against passing information to authorities or snitching. Detroit is also known for its Devil's Night on October 30th, popular between 1970s and the 1990s, when people would commit mass arson throughout the city, which was depicted in the cult classic The Crow in 1994. To this day, the state and local government have worked together to tackle crime issues, and planning a development strategy is in the works to improve Detroit's failing infrastructure. Number 12. Guatemala City, Guatemala. A city with two faces, Guatemala City on the one hand is located in a beautiful valley rich with tourist-friendly culture, while on the other, it is a place full of gang violence, robbery and homicide. The tourist districts have been eradicated of daytime robbery due to the increased police presence, but purse snatching and pickpocketing is still an issue, and thugs have robbed people outside of banks after they've withdrawn money. Carjacking is also a major issue, and occur mostly at night, along with the other crimes the city is known for. The city and the country is also a major route for drug traffickers making their way to the United States, leading to rivals fighting over routes and attempting to disrupt each other's business. Gangs also extort the local businesses, and many of the homicides are related to gang turf wars and the drug trade. Travelers are advised to use extra caution when visiting the city and not to venture out alone at night, and to stay within the tourist districts to avoid any trouble while they're there. Number 11. Karachi, Pakistan. The largest city in Pakistan and the third largest city in the world, Karachi has also been the center of various terrorist attacks since the beginning of the War on Terror. While far away from the border with Afghanistan, the area most associated with fighting between terrorist cells and the Pakistani government, Karachi is still an area for attacks due to its size and importance in Pakistani's economy and growth. On July 8, 2014, 10 members of the Taliban dressed in military attire launched an assault on Karachi's Jonah International Airport with automatic weapons, rocket launchers and grenades. The following morning, Pakistani forces killed 8 of the combatants, with the remaining 2 committing suicide via explosive vests. The city of 23 million has become a hotbed of crime, with over 2,700 murders happening in 2013. The perceived lawlessness of Karachi has led militants to use the city as a stronghold and take control of certain areas of the city. As the war on terror rages, it looks as if there is no end in sight for Pakistan's once center of hope for a long and prosperous future for the country. Number 10. Rio De Janeiro, Brazil. Home of Christ the Redeemer and host of the 2016 Summer Olympics, Rio is still a relatively dangerous city. The city is surrounded by shanty districts known as favelas, where crime is rampant for those who dare to venture in. Many of these favelas virtually exist outside of the control of police and local government. Even in the so-named pacified favelas, police assistance can be somewhat delayed, especially at night, due to the high crime rate. Crime around the city rises around Carnival with the increased tourists, which criminals prey on and are targeted with robberies, thefts and muggings. Curiously, travel sites warn of random manhole explosions occurring, and some hotels are notorious for having sky cameras for people to film and blackmail tourists in exchange for not releasing tapes. Travelers are warned to steer clear of the favelas, avoid walking alone outside the tourist zones at night, and to thoroughly check hotel rooms for anything suspicious. Other than that, Rio remains a highly recommended tourist destination for travelers, and people can enjoy a wonderful vacation there, albeit with extra caution to avoid any incidents. Number 9. Cape Town, South Africa. A large tourist destination on the African continent, Cape Town still has its dark side. In 2014, the murder rate was 50.94 murders per 100,000 people, giving it the highest murder rate of all of Africa, outside of a war zone. Gang-related violence is high, resulting in 18% of incidents, and nearly 1/3 are domestic violence-related crimes. The crimes mostly occur in the outlying neighborhoods, where the former apartheid regime segregated the so-called non-whites, and researchers have theorized much of the crime can be traced back to the oppressive white minority rule, treating the majority population as lesser citizens. The city is also a large drug trafficking area. With the gangs controlling the meth and heroin trade in South Africa, with a high unemployment rate, many turn to gang activity to provide for themselves and their families. The city is safe for tourists within the tourist areas, but traveling outside these districts is greatly discouraged, and extra caution is highly recommended for those who decide to visit the otherwise beautiful city and what it has to offer. Number 8. San Salvador, El Salvador. The capital city of this tiny Central American country, San Salvador has a homicide rate of 45 murders per 100,000. For a city of 570,000 people, that's an alarming rate. For further emphasis on the issue, in the first half of 2015, there were 2,200 murders. The source has been speculated to date back to the Civil War in the 1980s, after guerrilla forces began sporadic attacks on the city. Studies trace most of the murders back to the large gang presence in the city and the fighting between rivals MS-13 and Barrio 18. Sadly, many of those killed are civilians who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The gang's biggest source of income is through extortion, robberies and muggings, so many visitors will find themselves victims of theft and murder. While authorities have been able to lower the crime rate in 2011, with District 3 and 4 regarded as the safest in the country, crime is still an issue, and many of these homicides remain unsolved. Number 7. Cali, Colombia. A city within a hotbed of drug terrorist activities, Cali is the center of a drug rivalry between the Cali cartel and Los Urbanos, both of which have their roots in the city. Colombian magazine Semana claims a total of 1,700 assassins working in the city for the two cartels and various gangs. The Marxist militia FARC has a large presence in Cali with over 1,000 members residing there. The homicide rate in 2014 was 68.45 per 100,000, almost 3 times higher than the murder rate for all of Colombia, with Comuna 20 having 174 murders in 2011 alone. A joint effort between the Colombian Army and Metropolitan Police to step up action against the militias and drug cartels to decrease the violence, and the municipal government increased the amount of CCT coverage in the city in order to tackle and deter further crimes. The US State Department has a travel warning on Cali due to the crime and terrorist activity, and tourists are advised to stay within the tourist districts and not to venture out alone at night due to the danger of robbery and kidnapping. However, Cali's crime rate is continually dropping each year, and the local and federal governments show no sign of letting up on the crackdowns. Number 6. Mogadishu, Somalia. Located in the southern end of Somalia, Mogadishu has shifted between the control of the federal government and the various warlords and militia groups attempting to take control of the country. The peak of the violence occurred in 1993 with the famous Black Hawk Down incident, when an American-led UN mission led to a raid to arrest several warlords taking up residence in Somalia, and resulted in the loss of 2 Black Hawk helicopters, and 20 UN peacekeepers were killed. After the incident, the UN mission withdrew from Somalia. Ever since, the country has been in a state of anarchy, and various groups have come and gone throughout the civil war, and for a period between 2006 and 2009, Mogadishu was under the control of the Islamic Courts Union. Mogadishu was the site of 3 major battles in the Somali civil war between 2007 and 2008 alone, and has been the target for numerous terrorist attacks in the past few years. As of August 2011, Mogadishu is in control of the Somali government, but Al-Qaeda-affiliated groups still threaten the safety of residents and foreigners within the city. The US State Department lists Mogadishu as an extremely dangerous place and advises against all to travel to the city. The most desperate of residents in the city resort to theft and petty crime to make money, and all travel through the streets is recommended to be done with an armed escort. Number 5. Baghdad, Iraq. A city suffering from decades of war and civil unrest, Baghdad has been the epicenter of the ongoing conflict since the 2003 invasion by American and coalition forces in 2003. Ba'athist loyalists and fighters of the Islamic State currently have claims to the city, leading to a power struggle in an attempt to take advantage of the instability within Iraq, while government forces desperately try to maintain control and bring solidarity to an area rife with sectarian violence. Insurgents remain in the city, blending into the background, waiting to pull off another atrocious act on the many regular citizens who live and work within the city. Baghdad is riddled with IEDs and anti-personnel mines, which have sadly taken several lives, including small children. Suicide bombers are also common, with an attack by the Islamic State taking the lives of 7 people in November 2015. As the bombing campaign by coalition forces and ground campaign by Iraqi and Kurdish ground forces against the Islamic State intensifies, the violence in Baghdad appears to be a long way from being solved, and all travel there is strongly discouraged. Number 4. Acapulco, Mexico. Once a paradise for tourism, Acapulco sadly couldn't be spared from the escalating drug war. Since 2006, the city has seen various gunfights between government forces and the various cartels fighting over the area, and the violence has increased since the death of Beltran Leyva cartel leader Arturio. Beltran Leyva has caused a power struggle within the gang, resulting in a split and pseudo-civil war. In February 2013, 6 Spanish men were tied up and robbed, while they helplessly looked on as their captorers gang-raped the 6 Spanish women in the group near the outskirts of Acapulco. So far, there have been no arrests for the incident. Travel to the resort city is still popular, but tourists are advised not to leave food and drink unattended due to a string of robberies against drugged persons, and it's also recommended to avoid back roads if one hires a car due to potential kidnappings. It's best to keep up to date with your government travel advisory of updates on the situation, as well as tips should you decide to travel there for your next vacation. Number 3. Caracas, Venezuela. The capital of this South American country, Caracas, has one of the highest murder rates in the world, While initially listed as having a rate of 116 homicides per 100,000 people, reports showed that the Venezuelan government miscounted the city's population, and it was corrected to 71 per 100,000 in 2010. Crime mostly occurs in the lower-income neighborhoods, covering the hills of Caracas, and tourists are advised to remain clear of these districts, as they're designated dangerous at all times. The local authorities have been criticized due to most of the homicides remaining unsolved, and have been accused of censoring the reports of violence in the country. Kidnappings and muggings are also at record highs, with approximately 1,150 kidnappings in 2011 alone, many of which go unreported due to allegations of authorities being involved. Caracas is also supposedly a destination for human trafficking, according to the US State Department, who further accuses the Venezuelan government of not cooperating with efforts to eliminate such crimes. The US State Department and Government of Canada have placed a travel advisory on Venezuela due to the high crime rate, and travelers are warned to visit Caracas with caution. Number 2. Mosul, Iraq. The third largest city in Iraq, Mosul is located in the Nineveh Governorate, near Syria and Turkey. The city is currently under occupation by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL, and they have quickly implemented Sharia law. The city is now full of religious prosecution, cultural destruction, and misogynistic ideology, reflecting the fundamentalist views of the terror state. The Canadian-based RINJ Foundation has reported widespread rape to the point of genocidal proportions, and the city is now the center of a large slave market for women and girls as sex slaves to be sold to slave traders. Mosul is also the scene of a large bombing campaign by coalition forces due to the importance it poses to ISIL, and the Kurdish Peshmerga are slowly closing in on the city in an attempt to surround and cut off ISIL forces, meaning urban warfare is inevitable. Because of this, many of the supply roads have been cut off, meaning food and water is becoming scarce. Travelers are strongly advised to avoid Mosul at all costs due to the intensity of conflict there. But it's predicted once Mosul falls, ISIL hold in Iraq will quickly wither back across into Syria and possibly mean an end to the Islamic State. Number 1. San Pedro Sula, Honduras. This city stands out amongst the rest of the entries on this list. It had the single highest homicide rate in 2015, with 171.2 per 100,000, much higher than the national rate of 90.4. Local morgues have stated they're having a hard time of conducting autopsies fast enough to keep up with the amount of bodies coming in. Many of the bodies go unidentified due to fear of gang reprisals against the family members and end up in mass graves, and 97% of the homicides go unsolved. The issue in crime is blamed on poor police training, corruption, and lack of resources to conduct proper forensic analysis. Gangs are prevalent in the city and often extort protection money out of local businesses, with huge reprisals for those who refuse to pay. Much of the violence is caused by the ongoing rivalry between MS-13 and Barrio 18 over the control of the drugs trade. San Pedro Sula has a high orphan rate due to the violence, and many of the orphaned children end up recruited into the gangs through extortion of the schools, threatening teachers and selling sex in exchange for taking children into their ranks. The issue has led to a number of Honduran children traveling all the way to the US-Mexican border to try and start a new life in the US, but as many as 18,000 are caught and deported back to Honduras. San Pedro Sula's gangs are also notorious for their violence against members of the LGBT community and often pressure transgender sex workers to sell drugs, with punishment for those who do not meet the quota. Travel is discouraged due to the unsafe conditions, and it appears little is being done.
Got an idea for a top 15 list? Submit it at top15s.net/submit. Be sure to subscribe for future videos. Thanks for watching.